So thank you so much joining me and being willing to come on and talk to me. Before we get started, will you just take a moment and introduce yourself to the people that are tuned in with us?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Courts. I am a recent graduate of North Carolina Central School of Law, actually a May 2020 graduate. And I live
Yes.
in North Carolina, but I'll be moving soon. So I'm just really excited to be here with Attorney Ruffin and ready to talk.
Yay. So where are you headed, Ian?
I'm headed to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. Now, for those of
Yes.
you who are a little, the DA Krasner is a very progressive district attorney. That's
Yes.
one of the reasons why I decided to join the office. I had no interest in being a prosecutor prior to hearing him speak actually at Central. And I went and
Mhm.
interned, and he offered me a job, and now I'll be headed there in the fall. So.
Yeah, I read an article about him a couple of months ago and was just so impressed with him. He is extremely progressive, um, very much into justice, not the traditional prosecutor. So I think you're gonna have a wonderful experience, and Philadelphia should be interesting.
Yes, it definitely is. I was there this past summer interning, and it was great. It was different from North Carolina, much different. First time I resided in a big city for more than just visiting. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to get involved. There's some real issues in the city, specifically with criminal justice, and some things still that progressive will still needs to turn in many areas. But I'm excited to go and be a
Mhm.
part of the discussion and conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exciting. I'm excited for
Yeah.
you. Um, yeah, I have to stay in touch and let me know how it's going.
I
And
definitely will.
you initially hesitated when you said, I'm going to be in the DA's office because there is a stigma attached to people that opt to prosecute. And I think one of the things we can do during this conversation is explain to our viewers how important it is to have African Americans in these offices doing what you're going to do.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm kind of excited. I'm very excited about your decision. Did you originally want to be a defense attorney, or were you kind of open?
Well, I originally wanted to be a defense attorney. I wanted to do public defense work. I was torn either between doing public defense work or clerking, assisting judges with, writing opinions, whatever. That's just, more where I wanted to go. But once
Mm-hmm.
DA Krasner came and he spoke at Central, and hearing him speak, hearing him talk about progressive prosecution, because I had never heard of it, it really inspired, something in me was inspired, and I said, I want to be a part of this. And I told him, I'm hesitant on this whole process. I said, this internship is going to be me trying you out to see, if it's
Mm-hmm.
something I want to be a part of. And I got there, and I did see where growth is needed, but overall I was happy to be a part of something real, something, changing the system.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I originally asked you to join me to have a conversation about the death penalty because that is a topic that is very near and dear to me and something that I think that we don't talk about enough anymore. But before we kind of steer off into that conversation, I, of course, want to talk to you about everything that's been taking place since May 25th, since the death of George Floyd. And I guess I'll start with asking you, did you watch the actual video footage of him being murdered?
I did, and I thought it was horrible. It didn't surprise me
Mm-hmm.
because as a black man and as a person who's had family members, close family members who have been caught up in the system, you understand how powerless individuals like us can feel in a
Mm-hmm.
situation like that. And further, when you have a law enforcement officer who has their knee literally on your neck for over 8 minutes, and you hear him saying, I can't breathe. You hear people around saying that I can't breathe. And even some of the officers who were arrested said, don't you think we may need to turn him over? And to see just the disregard and disgust this officer who's supposed to enforce the
Mm-hmm.
law had for this particular individual, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still kind of devastated about what I saw. My cousin sent it to my family in a group chat, and I was like, "Oh, do I want to see this?" You know, I'm just so tired of seeing it. And then when I
Yeah.
saw it, I was like, "Oh my God,
Hmm.
I just the murder."
Yeah.
And I think the thing that stood out the most for me, Ian, was just the way Derek Chauvin just looked at the cameras. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
He just didn't care.
And
And it was,
he had had
huh?
incidents, and he had had incidents in the past where he had
Right.
done similar activities. I believe, and if I'm wrong, someone please correct me. I believe he had shot another African American person before, and so
Yes.
but the thing was, this is not anything that was new or particular to this police department and this individual. We've
Hmm.
seen repeated cases throughout
Hmm.
since Rodney King on to now, and many before. And so that's
Hmm.
how, you know, a lot of conversation is going on around, police brutality, the killing of black men because of police violence. But I would also argue that this has been going on even prior to police doing it. Our system has set up
Yeah.
itself to where the state can exact violence on minority communities, such as the death penalty.
Hmm.
If you're against police
Right.
brutality, I argue you should be against the death penalty as well.
I agree. But I'm going to let you explain to the viewer why you feel that way.
I feel that way because if you look at the death penalty and essentially what it is, it's state sanctioned murder or state sanctioned
Yeah.
killing. I'm going to take it from
Yeah.
murder, state sanctioned killing. And the state is deciding to take a life. And if you go
Hmm.
back to, specifically in regards to African Americans, if you go back to slavery times, you know, African American bodies were at the will of their masters, and the law supported that. If you look at State v. Mann or North Carolina v. Mann, it's a case that we learned in torts that was decided in 1830, where the Supreme Court of North Carolina said that a master has almost complete control over the body of a slave, and there was no legal recourse for the slave in the courts. That's horrible. And we
Yes.
see that evolve through our criminal justice system to where states are enacting the death penalty disproportionately toward African Americans. And that is a direct state violence, but also police brutality is another form of state sanctioned killing of minority
Hmm.
African American persons. Um, there are greater numbers of white persons who are killed by police, but the disproportionate impact is that based off the percentage of African Americans in this country, the percentage of police who kill us is significant. And
Right.
that is also the case in the death penalty and imposition of the death penalty. I hear many African Americans who say that, I support the death penalty because if you do wrong, you kill someone else, you rape someone else, you should go. But I said, do you know that if I was to kill you as an African American victim, I'm least likely to get the death penalty versus if I was to kill someone who is Caucasian in this country?
Right.
And so I don't
Exactly.
think people think of those realities and think of it and how the death penalty has inherited those slave traditions, those state sanctioned killing of a human being.
I agree. I agree. So where do you think as a society we have failed with educating people about the death penalty and the impact that it has, and basically trying to steer people's mindset so that they're not so quick to say, yes, he murdered somebody, so he deserves death.
I
We're
think I think for much of the conversation in criminal justice reform and around death penalty, I would say starting with the riots that happened in the 60s in
hmm
response to, a lot of police brutality that occurred then, what we see from speeches from Nixon into Reagan, all the way into Bill Clinton, we see this rhetoric that,
hmm
the purpose behind over policing, the purpose behind criminal justice reform, the purpose behind, cutting down on crime is to protect the community. And so one of these
Right.
things was the imposition of the death penalty. And so to many people, once you've been conditioned, because you've heard this over and over and over, you believe that, okay, this is to protect the community, when in all actuality, it's not. It's not. It's
You're
being
right.
used specifically to control particular people groups. And one of the things people will put out and say in support of the death penalty is, well, more criminals would be deterred if they know they were going to face the death penalty. It has no deterrent effect.
No.
No.
And,
And
yeah, 20 years that I have practiced law in North Carolina, I have not had one client say, I really thought about the possibility that I might get death.
no,
So it's not a deterrent. And
no.
people are so misguided by thinking that. The other thing I hear a lot, Ian, is uh, when people support the death penalty or try to justify their support of the death penalty, they say, well, we're spending all of this money, keeping people in prison, so might as well just go ahead and kill them, and then we save money. And that's not true either.
Mm-mm.
But seem to be missing the mark as far as getting that information out there. In fact, I grabbed a stat for our conversation just to kind of get a feel for the money portion. And it said that the most comprehensive study in the country found that the death penalty cost North Carolina $2.16 million per execution over the cost of sentencing murderers to life imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
So it costs more to give somebody the death penalty. And I think what people don't understand is once a person is sentenced to death, they're basically isolated. They're on death row. That requires a whole nother level of security.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very expensive, and they stay on death row for long periods of time. So I don't know. I don't remember when I was younger having a lot of conversations in my community and my family about the death penalty. When you grew up, were you having those types of conversations?
Not in particularly in my family. There were conversations. I went to a school that encouraged and fostered this type of debate, but you saw a division mainly among racial lines at my high school where we discussed this. But particularly to the point about the cost benefit of the death penalty, when did we start thinking of criminal justice reform, of the policing of bodies, of the terminating of someone's life in terms of money,
Right,
on the terms of
right,
cost? And I
right.
do know that most policy is pushed by cost to the community, but this has been relatively, I would say, within the last 20 or 30 years, since the 80s into the 90s, where we started to quantify criminal justice in terms of the monetary impact on our federal dollars and state dollars, because most of this is done on the state level. And
Mm-hmm,
so we did have some conversations in high school about it, but
mm-hmm.
outside of that, it's not an issue that you discuss much. In many Black homes, it's not discussed.
Right. Do you think that we're doing a disservice to our community by not having these conversations in our homes
I
and
do.
doing?
I do. And
Yeah,
I think, even outside of our homes, our churches and other community organizations
right.
should encourage and foster discussion around the death penalty, criminal justice. What does it mean to be a civic citizen? What does it mean to be, engaged in our government? And how do we reconcile that with historical and past discriminations? And what ways can we advocate? So I do think we're doing a disservice when we don't instruct our youth on the impact of the death penalty and how you're more likely, if you're poor or Black, or poor and Black, to get the death penalty than someone who is white and wealthy.
I agree. So I was reading your bio and reading about you, trying to learn more about you, and you seem to, and I actually, someone from my hometown knows you from church.
Yeah.
So tell me, what in your church did you have these conversations? And if not, how do you think there was a shift? Because there seems to have been a time where churches talked about these
Hmm.
issues. and took it upon themselves to educate Black people and make sure we were aware and knowledgeable. But we seem to have gotten away from that.
Mhm.
If you could talk a bit about why you think that is.
I would say we did not have discussions surrounding criminal justice reform in church, not in the church
Mm-hmm,
that I grew up in, and I thought that was a great disservice, because so many in the Black community attend church. Black church is one of the central or institutions of the Black community, and so many people in Black churches have family members who are impacted by the system. And I think it
yeah.
would have fostered just more aware citizens, more aware churchgoers, if we did have engaging conversations concerning criminal justice reform, as much as we engaged in conversations about morality, whether that morality is based upon the word of God or someone's personal opinion. And so, in a lot of our churches, that's missing. We don't have that
Mm-hmm,
much. I think the only time I would hear anything even closely related to criminal justice would be when we would have our district conferences and meetings, and the resolution committee would give a
mm-hmm.
resolution talking about a significant political issue. But other than that, nothing. And I think that was a great disservice. And we have many young people who are not aware, do not know how to function in these environments, because it's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So would you agree that we have to get back to the basics in terms of educating our community about things like the death penalty, brutality, and other things that are affecting us as a
I do. I really believe that, because if you look at it, the criminal justice, the civil rights movement came out of the Black church.
Mhm.
Many of these abolition was a church
Right.
behind that, and they work with civic organizations to do that. And we are missing out on instructing and teaching our young people on the importance of being engaged in society. And the church is a critical institution to help with that.
Hmm. I was listening to some video and some speeches the other day, and one thing that they were focusing on that I've always been a big advocate of is engaging young people, and that's one of the reasons I have this conversation with you, because I don't think that we do enough to connect across generational lines. So some traditionally someone like me who has been practicing law for 20 years is going to engage with somebody else that's been practicing, rather than say, hey, I've got this young man that's fresh out of law school, getting ready to make his mark on the world. Let's talk to him and see what's going on, how he's thinking, what his thoughts are. Why do you think that is? We have such a breakdown as far as the generational interactions.
We see it in so many institutions, in the church, in the law, and just in government. I think one of the things is just younger people speaking up and raising their voices. We see a lot of that going on right now. And one of the
Yes,
movers behind this recent protests in Black Lives Matter and pushing for defunding police or whatever is coming from young people.
yes.
But a lot of times young people are not as actively engaged in the political process through actually voting in it. And older people, or more seasoned or mature people, sometimes forget that the importance of keeping a movement going, keeping traditions and values going, is getting and engaging a younger generation, because they may have a different way, a different thought process in doing it. And one of the greatest misfortunes I see taking place is a lot of our traditional institutions are losing out on the human capital and mental capital that is young people. And many young people are losing out on that wisdom and instruction that can come
Hmm.
from the generation before us. So I think a lot of times we operate in our own silos, but we have to find a way to bring these two groups together through conversations like this, through community activism projects,
Hmm.
through, okay, this is how we protested in the 60s. This is what we've gotten done this way. What are you guys' ideas today? And this is how you can change it and make it better. I'm more of a person that likes to bring the old and the new together and try to
Right.
create something new and unique and strong. And I think we need to have more of those conversations, being intentional about that. Because sometimes younger people can detect a shift or a move and or an injustice that sometimes older people may not, and
Hmm.
because it's so much more connected to the systems that are currently going on. And I was sharing with someone, we are really living in a time where the social contract of our country is being rethought about. You know,
Hmm.
what does it mean for us to be engaged? What does it mean for us to be citizens of this state? What does it mean to have a criminal justice system? And I
Right.
think that is so important. And during this time of protesting and rioting, because I think all of that works together, we also have to be on that back end of building lasting movements in communities. We need to think about, what does it mean for a police officer to police
Right.
moving forward? What
Right.
does it mean? What does justice look like? Why is there such a broad discretion given to prosecutors? You know, do we need mandatory minimums? We have to rethink our relationship as a community with each other and our community's relationship with our government.
I agree. I agree. And I think that in order to really sit down and do that and come up with something that is going to really cause the shift that we need, we have to be willing to come together.
Right.
Um, and I guess that's something that's very frustrating for me right now, because I was just having a lively discussion last night with our local NAA president, basically because he's been silent on this issue.
Mhm.
And then I was like, we're not trying to get young people involved, and
Mhm.
we're missing the
Mhm.
mark here. So I'm very frustrated by that, as you see, because I
Mhm.
we're totally missing the mark. And then the other thing that concerns me is that when I look at what's going on television around the world and social media, young people are basically saying, we're not our ancestors, you
Mhm.
know, and they're pissed off, and they're basically looking at their ancestors saying, you didn't do enough, because
Mhm.
we're not having a conversation so that they understand what took place.
Mhm.
So that just really concerns me. So, how would you say, looking at everything that's been going on, Ian, um, what recommendations would you give to the older generation in terms of how we could engage younger people more?
I would say meet them where they are. Engage with them on social media. Engage with them and just their cultural places, because the way young people and the way we operate today is different from the way other people you guys may have operated in the past. The language is
Right.
different, you know, and the
Right.
way that we go about things is different. You have to understand that as a whole, this generation is a very action oriented generation. You know, if something sparks their interest, they're going to get out there and they're going to do. Sometimes we'll
Yeah.
do without thinking. And so utilizing that ability to be active and then be involved and start positioning people to learn from you. You know, come with me to this NAACP event, or how can we bring this NAACP event to the community? How can we engage, you know, the youth involved to get involved in that? Because for many young people, NAACP looks like an organization that has done, but what has it done for us lately? And
Mm-hmm.
people are not as aware on the work that's doing. And I don't think across the board the NAACP and other organizations are doing as well as they can in investing in this current generation and growing. I know several young persons who are very outspoken, young
Mm-hmm.
persons who are really standing black and white, red, blue, whatever, on their values and really standing and wanting to be active and engaged. And some of them don't have the platforms to do so, or don't have some of those connections to connect and engage them. And so providing opportunities, providing platforms for these young people that, you know, if you know a young person is very engaged, has some good ideas on a local civic ordinance, a local city ordinance, bring them to that meeting. or
Mm-hmm.
encourage them to come to that meeting. If you know that a young person has a nonprofit, I know my generation is really big on starting nonprofits, invest in that nonprofit, promote that nonprofit. That this person has a gift in some way, whether it be musical or hip hop or rap. Engage those gifts that you see and give them those platforms and those opportunities and mentor them. That's
Mm-hmm.
another low risk way to get people involved, is to mentor, and I think our generations is looking for mentors, but we can't always find mentors who are really and truly invested in growing us and expanding us.
Really. So I would say sometimes because when I was growing up, I very much looked for mentors. I wanted to shadow people and just learn as much as I could. And sometimes I feel like younger people are like, you, you, you're old,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know? And so I don't get that sense of I'm looking to someone to show me the way anymore. It's we're here to show you how it needs to be done. Get out of the way. And why do you think that is?
I think for many young people, is they've been let down by what they see as potentially older people not living up to the values that they try to espouse on them, or if they have uh, voiced wanting to be involved, it being turned away or put aside. I'm not going to say
Right.
that's the case for all young people, because there are some young people who do not care about mentorship, but there's something deeper there. I would say there's some rejection that's there in the past that's impacted the way they receive someone coming to build them up and to encourage and grow them. And so I think perseverance is something that's very important on behalf of younger persons and older persons. And this is not going to happen overnight, but this is something I'm truly invested in. And I know a lot of young people, they see many people come to them and say they want to help or they want them to be engaged. But once they see a little hesitancy on their part, they back away. But they like
Mm-hmm.
to see some form of consistency, some form of persistence, that you're going to be here, that you're going to help me, that you're going to really give me the resources to grow and to build, and that you're not just going to judge me. You're not going to tell me that that way can't be done, because there's new ways, there's new things going on. And so I don't have all the answers on engaging every young person, because there are different experiences amongst us all.
Right.
I'm more of a go-getter.
Yeah.
Everybody's not like that. And so finding ways to connect them, and a lot of young people connect and get involved through other young people.
Mm-hmm.
Someone they know is like that. Oh, I see Tim over here doing that. I'm gonna join Tim, because I know him. I'm connected with him. Or I see Tonza over here doing that. I've seen her. She's there. She's invested in us, and so I'm gonna go and work with her on those things. So just, I would say, one of the things, I'm gonna stop rambling. Being persistent,
Mm-hmm.
being intentional,
Mm-hmm.
and showing up when it's time to show up.
Awesome. Awesome. So did you have someone that inspired you when you were a young man growing up? And I think, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that you knew pretty early on that you wanted to be a lawyer when you were a little boy.
Yes, I didn't know any attorneys in my family. I will presumably, upon passing the bar, be the first attorney in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I did know a few attorneys in the church at large.
Mm-hmm.
I talked with them and they were very encouraging. But I came from a church and a family that really instilled the importance of education, the importance of standing up and speaking for what you believe. My grandmother is one of my greatest persons who inspire me, and my dad are two people who really pushed me, saw something in me, invested in me. I don't think they fully knew how it was going to turn out, but they were there every step of the way. And so, I was blessed, and I would say more so privileged, to have a family that encouraged that in me, because I was in the fourth grade when I
Mm-hmm.
decided I wanted to go to law school, learning about separation of powers, and I was exposed to Thurgood Marshall in the fourth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really sparked my interest into
Wow.
going to law school. But I would say it didn't really become an actuality, something cemented in me that I wanted to do, until I got to college as
Mm-hmm.
an undergrad and got involved in campus activities and like local NAACP chapter and residence hall associations and student conduct team, that I said, okay, this is something I really want to pursue, because I saw social justice in a different way. In my hometown, there's not as much discussion on social justice, but when I went to UNCG and seeing how much people were involved and what social justice meant, it really got me inspired and excited. And so, yeah.
Awesome. So is Pennsylvania one of the states that does not have the death penalty, or
Well,
do
it
they?
has a moratorium on the death
Okay.
penalty.
Okay.
Uh, this past summer, when I was in the DA's office, something historical happened.
Mm-hmm.
The DA Krasner, joined with some other persons in challenging the application of the death penalty in
Really?
the state of Pennsylvania. They called upon the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to use its King's Bench jurisdiction
Mm-hmm.
to rule that the way the death penalty is applied is unconstitutional. And they examined several cases within the last since 1976, when the death penalty was reinstated, and looked at the statistics. And if you were Black, you were more likely to get the death penalty. If you were poor, you were more likely to get the death penalty, whether Black or white. One of the reasons was because of access to competent counsel. We
Right.
all know that you need effective counsel to really advocate for you to put together that mitigation report to get the death penalty off the table, or not even presented in the table in the first place. And once looking at that ineffective assistance of counsel, you saw that many of these persons were getting paid very little. There was very little incentive, other than being a good person and doing what is right,
Right.
to get these persons off. And many have these private systems where, an attorney just goes sign up to be on the roster to get cases, and they weren't investing the time that was needed in getting those cases done. So they said, as applied, the death penalty is unconstitutional. It was revolutionary because a DA advocating for the abolition of the death penalty,
Yeah.
as applied, I have
Yeah.
to emphasize, that was significant. Of course, the Supreme Court punted on the issue and said they were not ruled on that particular issue, but I think it put forward some things and some legislation in the state of Pennsylvania to work to really to reform how the death penalty is applied, and hopefully move it toward abolishing the death penalty.
Is that what you'd like to see, for it to
Yeah,
be abolished?
I would like to see for the death penalty to be abolished. And if we can't get it abolished, there needs to be stricter, terms in how that is going, which leads me to a case that was just decided here in North Carolina, which I'm sure you saw, with
Uh-huh.
the Racial Justice
Yeah.
Act. Stately
Yes.
Rancher, I interned with Justice Earls in the fall, and
Really?
they had heard the oral arguments for the RJA. For people who don't know what the RJA is, it's the Racial Justice Act,
Right.
which was implemented by the General Assembly to say if a criminal defendant was found, there was some type of prejudice or racial animus, or some taint of race in their conviction, that a prisoner could request relief from the court, and the death penalty could be removed or the case overturned. And then the legislator repealed that act, but there were like over 100 persons whose cases were pending during the appeal, and the North Carolina Supreme Court, Justice Earls, writing the majority opinion, said that that was unconstitutional. That was a cruel and unusual punishment because it increased the severity of the crime. And so I thought that was amazing. If you read in the opinion, we're discussing some of this in chamber. I can't reveal too much, but she used a case from the 1800s
Really?
dealing with the Amnesty Act. And the Amnesty Act was passed saying, after the Civil War, if you were a member of the Confederate Army and you have committed war crimes against the United States, you could rejoin the United States, recommit to the United States, and you would be forgiven. Well, the state legislator tried to repeal the Amnesty Act back then, and the court said, no, you can't do that. This right had vested in persons. They had the ability to be free, like it was pardoned from this, and you're removing that. And so she used that same reasoning here with the Racial Justice Act. These persons had filed their petitions that with them, and to remove that a level of review increased the punishment, and it was an unconstitutional thing to do in violation of the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Constitution. So, yeah.
So amazing to talk to you and refreshing. I'm just so excited about you getting out there in the world, whether it be Philadelphia or maybe one day returning to North
Yeah.
Carolina. Um, just to, see someone young and excited about practicing law. I'm just really excited for you.
Yes. And I would say there's many, recent graduates who are excited. I know at North Carolina Central, and I know a few at some other law schools. And I just, want to encourage them that even despite everything that's going on, we still have to persevere because there's people who are waiting on us. There are people who need
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
We're needed.
Need your enthusiasm, need your zest for life, need your zest for justice and what's right, need your strength. I mean, you're very clear on your position on the death penalty. That's important, because you don't want to, when you are not so sure, you
Mm-hmm.
wait. So you're very, I'm just curious, did you have to have conversations about your position on the death penalty when you were going through the hiring process? Or I guess going to work with someone that's pretty progressive as a DA, that wasn't a concern of his, that you were against the death penalty?
No, I didn't have that particular conversation. I don't know with other persons because he was very intentional in choosing progressive-minded individuals to
Hmm?
come into office. And so I'm not saying that every progressive person is against the death penalty,
Right.
but that wasn't a conversation he and I had. And if we did have that conversation, he would know clearly my stance on that. So, yeah, I think more people need to be confident in their stance, especially newer, younger attorneys who are coming out. I do understand there may be some pressures from outside to make you just kind of be quiet on your stance, but we're living in really an interesting time where we're rethinking
Yeah.
police, rethinking criminal justice, and I think you will disservice yourself by not speaking up and standing on those values. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Before I let you go, because I know you're studying for the bar and I don't want to interfere with that. Did you form your views on the death penalty, Ian, before law school or during law school?
So I did have a position on death penalty starting in high school.
Uh-huh.
And at that point in high school, there were instances where I supported the death penalty, such as when a person was raped or, when a
Hmm.
child is involved or whatever. But I did not know the full impact of the death penalty. Instead, I started researching and discussing, getting ready for a high school debate. And I realized I cannot, in my Christianity,
Hmm.
stand for the government killing another person, especially when it's all this evidence that it's going to be misapplied. And so from that
Right.
point forward, my belief had been cemented. And in law school, I participated in several death penalty project debates. We'd had the school advocating against imposition of the death penalty. And so, if there's a way that I can help, make sure the death penalty is gone, I will do that. And that's my goal, whether it's through the bench or through the advocates podium. That's what I'm going to do.
Awesome. So Tonza D. Ruffin LLC is an organization that I started recently with the goal of unifying women across generational lines. So when I talk to people, I ask, are you a feminist?
Mm-hmm.
Are
Oh,
you?
are you actually? Oh, I do. I
Yes.
am. I'm a male feminist. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
And
And
I would
how long
also
have you?
say Mormonist too, because there's the Black
Okay.
Mormonism. That's a little different from feminism, but that's a different conversation.
How long have you been a feminist and a womanist?
Well, I would say, probably from a child, because one of the strongest influences in my life was my grandmother. Another one was my pastor, and my pastor is a woman. I had strong female influences and strong male influences as well. Um, and so I really believe my grandmother could do anything she wants to do. And so I've always supported that. And then, as just from a viewpoint as a man, I just don't see it right to, try to legislate what a woman can do.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
because I'm not a woman, you know.
We love it. And what does empowerment mean to you?
Empowerment to me means giving people the resources to be able to change their communities. And whether that is internal spiritual resources as well as opportunities in our community. One of the most important things that I think we as Black attorneys can do is back to Charles Hamilton Houston, where he said that lawyers are social engineers. We are to construct an environment and a system that benefits all people equally. And if we're not social engineers, then we're parasites. And the most important job a lawyer can do is to empower someone else to be able to feel like an individual, to feel like they're protected, to feel like that they can have trust for justice in this system. And so to me, you're not empowering people if you're making them crippled and dependent upon you. Real
Right.
empowerment is empowering them